Hi everyone, this is Kasia Zmokla. Welcome to my channel where you will find photo editing training and educational videos to help you grow as an artist and photographer. In this video, I address John's question. If I took this rocky landscape in which we have already created very strong color contrast, we have enhanced this image, how much more editing would it take to convert it to black and white? So I'm going to break down for you my black and white conversion workflow into 3 simple steps. I will show you how I created this monochromatic version of the color image. And extra hint for you here, sometimes taking time is actually a shortcut. Okay, let's jump right into it. Okay, so let's take a look at the color version of this image. So we've been working on color contrast for this image in one of the previous videos. The link is available in the description. So Jones requested to go one step further, and after creating this final artwork, he was curious how much longer it would take to create a black and white representation of the image. Do you remember the quote that I have mentioned in the intro to this video? The quote from Haruki Murakami, "Sometimes taking time is actually a shortcut." So the quote perfectly applies to this image. So let's take a look. So if we just take a quick look at our layers, basically the simplest idea would be to convert the image to black and white. You can do this with one simple trick. All you need to do is to just new field adjustment layer. You can do this on one of the existing layers, but I want to be tidy and organized here so we know what we are doing. So on this separate layer, I'm just going to jump over to the exposure tab. We have our layer here, and I'm just going to push saturation slider all the way to the left. So that way I have desaturated the image, but if you look carefully, you will still see color in the image. So before desaturating, this was our color version. Here we have been working a lot on enhancing contrast, on enhancing luma contrast, tonal contrast, and then we focused on adding very strong color contrast here to create separation between the plans. But now if I desaturate the image, we have removed color, we have monochromatic representation of the image, but the image is not black and white. And we can check this very quickly if I take a look at the color readouts. So here for the sky we have 156 for the red, 151 for the green, and 180 for the blue. So this indicates that we have very strong bluish purplish color cast here. And this color cast is present over the whole image. If I move over and if I take the color readouts here, we have a lot of red. We have 82 for the red, 74 for the green, and 75 for the blue. Okay, but you might say, why not to convert the image instead of using this very simple trick? Instead of desaturating it, why not to just convert the image to black and white? Let's do this, let's try. So this is another shortcut that I would say in case of this image is actually pushing us into running loops. So to convert your color image to black and white, you need to be on the background layer. In fact, I should say you can be on any layer you wish, but the conversion will always take place on background layer. You cannot convert your image on extra layer. This is always taking place in the background layer. So being here, let's quickly jump over to the color tab. Let's scroll all the way down, and here we have our black and white tool. So if I just click this little button here, I have switched on the black and white tool and I have applied black and white conversion. But the result is very similar. Again, I have created monochromatic version of the image, But we have encountered exactly the same problem here as with desaturation, because the image is monochromatic, but it's not black and white. Let's quickly check color readouts. So for the sky, the same situation, 138 for the red, 138 for the green, and 171 for the blue. So we've been working on creating depth in this image, we've been working on creating color contrast, on creating separation between particular plants in the image. So the foreground is very strongly warmer than the rest of the rocks and the rest of the plants. It is much warmer. We can check color readouts. So then we have the middle plan, we have that rock here, and this is sort of between those yellowy, brownish, earthy colors and the blue rock that is visible here in the third plan. Plus, we have this upper left triangle when we have those hills visible in far distance. So that way we've been working with color to create these three plans, and in this way we have added a lot of depth to this image. We've been able to create three-dimensional effect. We've been able to enhance three-dimensional effect. But if I just turn the image to black and white, this is simply gone. In black and white, all that matters is tonal contrast, is contrast between bright tones, middle tones, and dark tones. So when the color is gone, when we have removed the color, we still have the artifacts, and by this I mean that by manipulating with color, by manipulating with tones in the image to create this very strong color contrast, let's just quickly compare by looking at the original, not edited version of the image. So this is the original raw file, and by very strongly working with contrast and working with color, we have actually shifted tones in this image. So the tonal values here would be different in comparison with tonal values in this color image. So the reason for this is that if we again switch our black and white conversion, we have manipulated with the tones, so our whites, grays and blacks are no longer the same. We have shifted them after working on color. Plus we have this, I would say, unwanted color cast because we've been working with color balance. If for your color grading you would work only with color editor, after converting your image in black and white, it would be black and white. But if you were using color balance, this will always give you a color cast. This can be, of course, used to enhance your images, but you should do this consciously. You should be aware of this, and once you know this, you can use it to your advantage. So if we just quickly jump over to color balance, we can see here that I have manipulated with colors in color balance tool, the same on this layer, contrast and color. So getting back to our quote, we can say that to create a proper black and white conversion and to take full advantage of the information that was present in not edited raw image, we would be better off if we just start with the original not edited file. It might actually look like a lot of work, but let me show you my black and white conversion process. Let me break it down for you into 3 simple steps. So I'm going to show you how we can take this original raw file and how we can move towards this result. Let's just go for the final image. So here you might say that we still have a bit of color tint. Yes, that's true. I have added a bit of color as the very last layer, but if I switch it off, so now the tint is gone, we have black and white representation of the image. So if I take a color readout, we have always the same numeric values for all the colors, so that way we can check if the image is black and white. And let's take a quick look at these 2 images, one beside the other. So I don't know if you agree with me, but my impression is that the black and white conversion here, the effect is way more three-dimensional, is way more spacious. So here we've been focusing on color contrast, and that's true that if we switch off our automatic black and white conversion, we have a lot of depth, we have the beautiful color, but the simple way of just switching the black and white tool doesn't work. Okay, so let's jump right into this image and let's do our black and white conversion step by step. So first of all, I'm going to just clone this variant, so that way I have one more image, and I'm going to reset all these adjustments so we will be able to start with unedited raw file. I'm going to hide my browser so that way we have way more space to work with. Let's start with the exposure tab. So the very first step is going to be actually in the color tab, because the very first step that you want to take, so this is the first of my 3 steps of the black and white conversion process, the very first step will be always turning your image to black and white. There is no point of adjusting contrast, there is no point of adjusting anything, because after the black and white conversion all the tones are shifting, all the tones are changing, and this will require further fine-tuning. So remember, first step, always move over to your color tab, and in the black and white tool, simply enable black and white. So this gives us the automatic black and white conversion. If we quickly compare it with the final result, you can see how far it is from the final effect. So we will now focus on creating depth in the image. We will focus on luminosity adjustments. So this will be the second step. The first one, converting the image to black and white. The second, we will be working on creating three-dimensionality. We will be working on creating separation between these 3 plans. After removing color, the image is quite flat. We have more dark tones in the foreground. The foreground is way darker because we have the aerial perspective. So this means that the more air is between us and the rocky formation, between us and the plan, the brighter the plan will be. So the best example is to just quickly take a look at those hills visible here. They are really far, the distance is huge between the camera and those hills, so that's why they appear way brighter. So we are going to use this rule of aerial perspective, and in the black and white representation of the image we will be building our plans that way. We will be working on creating stronger contrast between the third plan and the first plan. We are going to make the first plan darker, the middle plan is going to be contrasty, but the third plan is going to be way brighter. So that way we will be able to add more depth to the image. So let's just get rid of this one and let's focus on our starting point. So once we have enabled the black and white tool, we have a chance here to work with these sliders, and that way we will be able to fine-tune how particular colors that were present in the image translating into tonal values. So if you've been ever working with black and white adjustment layer in Photoshop in similar tool in Lightroom, you should be familiar with this. This is very easy, very intuitive. In case of this image, we didn't have much color, but it will give us some results. And actually, before we start manipulating with these sliders, I'm going to enhance contrast. This is a very, very important step. So let's quickly jump over to the exposure tab, and we are going to apply auto levels adjustment. This is what I always recommend when you start working on any image. So simply, before we do this, we can take a look at our histogram. So what we want in most of our edits, and especially what we want to put the emphasis on in black and white image, We want to have all the data stretched across the whole graph. We want all the data to be stretched across the whole histogram, because now we have gaps here. So here the peak visible in the middle simply represents midtones. We have plenty of midtones in the image, and we have a bit of bright tones, but we are missing strong highlights and we are missing dark tones. So by creating contrast, I'm going to stretch the histogram, I'm going to simply add dark tones, and I'm going to add highlights. So you can do this super quick just with the levels tool. All you need to do is to just click on the second icon, so that way you are applying auto levels. Capture One is automatically creating the adjustment. So you can see that those points have moved, those sliders were adjusted. So again, this is before, this is the after. Keep your eye on the histogram and see how this changes after applying auto level. So now we still have the gap in the blacks, we have gap in the highlights, but after applying the auto adjustment, the histogram got stretched. Now the information is filling the whole graph and the image has changed as well. So this gave us perfect starting point, and we are going to jump back and fine-tune how our particular colors translate into tones. And before we do just that, I'm just going to very quickly touch highlights on the high dynamic range tool to recover a bit of details that were lost here in this upper left very bright corner. So I'm just going to push the slider towards the left, and that way I'm darkening the sky slightly, so the corner is a bit more harmonious with the rest of the image. Before it was sort of divided, the division, the contrast was very strong between the rock and the sky. So I'm not going to go very far, just to darken the corner a bit. Okay, so now we can jump over to our color tab and we can focus on our black and white tool. So here, by manipulating with these particular sliders, we can change how the colors look after translating to black and white. So if we push the red slider towards the right, we are brightening the reds. If we go towards the left, we are darkening the left. So now we have to be careful and we need to judge visually if this is benefiting our image or not. So as I've mentioned at the very beginning, when I was sort of setting the game plan for this black and white conversion, we want to be working on enhancing depth, on creating stronger separation between the plans. So if I would make my reds darker, this is making the image flatter. So if I go in the opposite direction, I'm adding more depth. The first plan, the foreground, is getting way more three-dimensional. So I'm just going to go for stronger value here. We can always take a quick preview. So if I hit Y, this will show me original image and I can see now what sort of colors are present here. This is a bit helpful when we will be touching this slider. So we can see that we have no green here. We have just a bit of these small plants here, so that will be our green. So this means that if we will be manipulating with the green slider, this is not going to give us a lot of result. So we can maybe darken it slightly, but the green is simply not present in the image. So let's go for the yellow slider. We have plenty of earthy colors here. This is going to give us strong effect. So similarly to red, if I push it towards the left, I'm darkening all the yellows. So the yellow, the original translation looked like that. But if I push yellow slider to the left, I'm darkening the tones that consist yellow, and if I go to the right, I'm brightening them. So I like the brightening effect, so this gives me again more three-dimensionality. I'm enhancing the highlights and I'm creating stronger tonal contrast between those dark parts and those that are lit. So maybe 100 is a bit too much. Let's go for 80, 82, something like that. So we've already touched the greens. Let's go for cyans. I don't think this will give us a lot of difference. Actually, yes, it does. So what it does is it is brightening the third plan, and this is what we are after in this edit. So I'm going to leave it somewhere around here. Remember that in Capture One you are working, of course, in a non-destructive way, so you can always get back to this tool and fine-tune these values if you feel that it can help the image further. So when it comes to the blues, I'm going to, of course, push it to the right because I want to create stronger distinction between the middle plan and the third plan. So you can see that by just manipulating with the blues, I have made the aerial perspective way stronger, so we have way more depth in the image if I just switch off the blue slider adjustment, and this enhances the aerial perspective. So we are making all the plans brighter, but in comparison with the third plan, the first one is not changing that strongly, but we are getting the very beautiful depth. So I'm going to leave it as it is, and when it comes to the magenta, let's see, this is brightening the image a little bit, and that way we are darkening it. So I'm just going to go for positive value. Let's say value around here works well. Okay, so let's proceed our black and white conversion further. We have performed the first step, which was simply switching on the black and white conversion. This gave us the auto effect. Now we are working on the second step, so we are working on polishing luminosities in our image. So in black and white photography, this is crucial. What we are left are tones, what we are left are darks, midtones and highlights, and the success of your final result will entirely depend on the contrast that you have in your image, on distinctions that you have created. So if we check the histogram, you can see that we are already shifting our values here. Okay, so far we've been working on the background layer. Let's now add another adjustment layer, and on this layer we will be working with luminosity adjustments. We will be fine-tuning it, and we will be working with my favorite tools, with curves. So here we are just going to add curve. So let's move over to our exposure tab. Here is my curve. I'm just going to pull it out and enlarge it. Making the tool bigger will simply allow you greater precision, which is crucial here. Okay, so it's snapped to this one. Let's just make it bigger. Okay, so here I'm just going to be working on Luma curve. Why on Luma? Simply because we are not working with color, so RGB is not relevant here. Here I'm going to use one of the ready presets, so I'm going to just go for Contrast Luma. Let's check. So this gives you immediately the preview of your effect. Let's check. Midtones brighter, no, this is flattening the image. Midtones darker, no again. This is darkening very strongly the third plan. And shadows brighter, this is definitely no. So I'm going to go for the Contrast Luma. So once I have applied this adjustment, we can judge the results. So first of all, okay, we need to make it slightly smaller. I want you to see what I'm doing here. So first of all, applying the Luma curve created strong tonal contrast, so I'm super happy with the result. We are halfway through our black and white conversion, so this is before, this is the after, but I just want to still recover those details here. I'm just going to quickly jump to the HDR tool and push again highlights towards the left. So that way our left upper corner is a bit more linked with the rest of the image. we don't want it to stand out super strongly and sort of create a hole in the composition. Okay, so let's now fine-tune our curve. So let's see, if I just go with this point a little bit more towards the top, I will be brightening all the bright midtones and going stronger with the highlights. So this can be a bit too much. Let's go for something like this. And let's go our darker midtones still a little bit darker, so that way I will be enhancing contrast. So I want to go for quite a dark tones in the foreground, that way I'm adding depth. And at this point I can quickly jump back to my background layer and check if now Capture One will give me better result with auto adjustment. So let's hit this icon again. So you can see that it actually pushed those sliders stronger towards the middle. This created very, very strong contrast. I'm not sure if I want to go that far, but actually, okay, let's just push back slightly the highlights and maybe let's make the midtones a notch darker. Okay. I think something like this works really, really well. So we have applied the curve, we have touched again the levels auto adjustment. On this layer you could work with levels again, but if you want to use the auto levels, this can be done only on the background layer. On this one, this icon is simply not active. Okay, so we have added the curve adjustment. Let's now take a look at the image and let's see what else we can do to further fine-tune luminosity levels, how to further work on composition. So I would say that I would like to apply a sort of vignette. So this will close the composition. So now I have the road that starts here. We are going inside. Here, this dark rock is sort of dividing the image. So let me switch on the annotation. So here we have the road that is taking our viewer inside, pulling the eye inside. But here we have this darker area here that is actually breaking the road. So the road continues here behind the rock and it goes all the way here. So I will work on making this part brighter. So this diagonal line will have continuation here. And I will add a custom vignette, so that way I will apply it on the sides of the image. So I'm going to make sides of the image darker. So that way I will sort of close the composition and I will try to keep viewer's eye on the middle, on the center part. I will force the eye to follow the road, to follow the path without being distracted by those lines that are created by the shapes of these rocky formations. Okay, so let's get back to work. So first we are going to apply bigger adjustment. I'm going to add custom vignette and then I will work on brightening the center. So let's add the first layer. And by the way, if you're getting value from this video, if you're getting value from my other videos, I will really appreciate if you hit the like button, if you subscribe to this channel, so that way I will be able to record in the future to make more free videos for you. So let's focus on creating our custom vignette. To do this, I'm just going to use the radial gradient and I'm going to make it quite large. So I don't want to darken the sky. I want to darken sides of the image and I want to make the transition very, very soft. So if I hit M, this gives me preview of the mask. Actually, no, I need to invert this. So let's right click and let's switch this off and let's draw our vignette again. Okay, so now this is perfect. It's a little bit too large. So I want to darken sides of the image without darkening the top that much. I want to darken those rocks here and the top right upper corner just to close the composition. So now I'm adjusting the mask. I want to try to darken the upper left corner as well. So this is preview of my mask. Let's switch it off. And now on our vignette layer, let's quickly move over to the exposure, and I'm going to apply negative value here to simply create darker effect, to darken the image in the place where the mask was applied, and that way I'm very nicely closing the composition. So let's quickly check. This is before, this is the after. We can reposition it, so having still our radial gradient icon selected, we can move it around and we can see how this works. So I would say I'm going too far, because as a very next step I will be brightening this part of the image. Okay, so I'm very happy with the effect. The only adjustment here will be to quickly jump over to HDR, and I want to see if opening the shadows a little bit will help, because I went for really dark shadows in the foreground. Let's check if we are crashing blacks with the exposure warning. We are a little bit. So this is bothering me a bit, so I'm just going to open it up. Okay, let's switch it on and let's touch the shadow slider. Okay, so this is fixing the issue. I'm not going to brighten them that strongly. I'm happy with rich blacks, a little bit of rich blacks in the foreground, but without touching the shadow slider, it was a little bit too much. So this was before fixing this with the HDR tool, and after. Okay, so we have added our vignette, which very beautifully closes the composition on both sides. We can actually increase this value here. Let's just select the numeric value and work with the arrows on my keyboard. So now it's calculating. No, this is way too much. Let's go for something around -55. Okay, this is perfect. Let's push shadows a little bit further to the right. Now it's way better. Okay, let's now add one more adjustment layer. So we are all the time working on the step number 2 of my black and white conversion workflow. We are fine-tuning luminosity. So here, let's just rename this layer to center, and I'm just going to apply, maybe I can, no, let's again use the radial gradient. This is the fastest way, and we can always rasterize it and fine-tune if we want to. I just wanted to brighten this part of the rock, so we will have continuation of the road. Now it's simply broken by this darker area. So here, let's try to open up shadows. We don't want to create anything artificial. We want everything to look harmonious. Okay, we are creating the mask on the outside. So again, let's draw inside and let's draw one more. So now this is perfect. Let's rotate it and let's just fine-tune it so it applies in the proper place. Let's switch off the preview of our mask and let's just reset this value. Let's apply this again. So this is opening up the shadows and brightening the image here. So now I'm just going to fine-tune my mask. So to do this, let's just select E for eraser and let's just go for quite high hardness, maybe around 60 flow, and let's just get rid of the mask from the foreground. So that way we will be brightening the middle plan without brightening the foreground. So let's switch off the preview of our mask and let's see. This is before, this is the after. So as you can see, the black and white conversion is built layer after layer. So The time that you will spend on it depends on you. So I would say that at this point I'm super happy with the effect. I might stop here. So we are almost done. I'm going to just create a few more little steps to polish it out to show you what can be done. But I would say at this point I'm super happy with the black and white conversion. So what I would do next, maybe we can still brighten the third plan, and maybe we can make at the same time some highlights a bit stronger. So let's do just that. Let's create new field adjustment layer and let's rename it. Let's call it light third plan. And here we will be working with the Luma mask. So let's hit on the Luma range and we are going to select the value that will cover the upper left corner and this part of the rock in the third plan. So I want to make this part brighter. This will create stronger tonal contrast between the darker part of the rocks and that part that is visible here. I want to create stronger separation. This is the word that you should remember when you're working on black and white. Separation, tonal separation. So let's switch on display mask so we'll see what is selected, where is our mask. Okay, so let's go for something like this and let's make sure that this part of the rock is covered. So maybe let's go a little bit further. Let's include more of the midtones. Now we are starting to lose the separation here, so let's just push it back and we can fine-tune this point. Let's push it backwards. Okay, I would say that this is going to work. So let's hit apply. So I'm going to open up those midtones with curve. So I'm in my layer, Luma curve. Let's add control point and let's anchor the curve so it won't be brightening the brightest highlights that strongly. I just want to open up midtones. I want to push them toward brighter tones. So that way I've managed to create way stronger distinction between the tones in the third plan, and I have brightened this part of the rock as well, which creates even stronger tonal contrast, stronger depth. The only problem I can see here that before applying this adjustment I liked way more the tones here, they were way more subtle. After pushing those bright midtones further, we are flattening this part and it almost looks like snow. So I'm just going to quickly fix it. So if I rasterize the mask, so let's just remove the mask from this area. So let's go for the eraser again. Let's increase size of our tool and let's very quickly brush over these areas where we don't want to have the brightening visible. So especially here from the road was already strong and there is no need to push it further. So we've been getting the result on the third plan on the rocks, but we are maintaining the tonal value on the middle plan and on the foreground that we've been already happy with. Okay, so we have fine-tuned the mask and now the image is getting really into shape. It's looking really, really good. Okay, so far we've performed the two first steps. We have created the black and white conversion on our background layer here with the black and white tool. The second step is always the most time consuming, so you are working on luminosity adjustments, you are building depth in your image, you are building the effect layer after layer. And the third step, this is just final adjustments, adding some texture, adding maybe some clarity. So we are already closing the black and white conversion. The effect that we have created, it looks really, really good, and Just now we can take a look at the image at 100% magnification level. So as you can see, the image contains plenty of detail, and when you are working on applying either sharpening or texture or clarity, always take a look at 100% because you want to make sure that it looks good, that you are not overdoing this. So when it comes to this image, it consists those beautiful rock formations, and I feel that it can benefit from some additional sharpness, from some additional texture. So let's just rename it and let's call it clarity. And let's add a little bit of clarity here in our exposure tab. So clarity, method, natural, and let's just push clarity slider a bit towards the right. So this is adding contrast to the midtones, and let's go for a bit of structure as well. Okay, we need to zoom out to see what is going on because the screen is not large enough. This is a raw file from the Fujifilm X-T2 and the image is quite large. So this is before applying clarity and this is after. The raw files from Fujifilm are very sharp, so I don't feel that there is a need to add additional sharpness to the image. I feel that the clarity and adding a bit of texture is more than enough. The very last touch that I might add here would be color grading, adding a bit of tint to the image, but I'm going to do this in a bit different way. You can do this simply by moving to your black and white tool and you can go for split tones. So here you can add a hue to highlights and to shadows separately. But I'm going to add new field adjustment layer. I'm going to rename it and call it tint. And I'm going to apply a tint in a bit, I would say, more creative way. So this will enhance this sort of vintage look to this image. The image to me has this really classy vintage look. So this sort of reminds me of a light leak. So let's just experiment a bit here. So I'm going to use my linear gradient tool. I'm going to create a linear gradient going sort of this way. So if I hit M, this gives me the preview of my mask. So I'm going to add a tint to this image with the tool that from the beginning sort of complicated our process. I'm going to be using color balance. Okay, so let's adjust the gradient a bit. We don't want to have half of the image black and white and half of the image with a color tint. So I'm going to cover most of the image, but to have the effect applied sort of gradually. Okay, so this is my mask. Let's hit M to get rid of the preview of the mask. So I'm going to experiment a bit here when it comes to the shadows. Let's try, maybe let's take a quick preview of the original raw file, and we are still building depth in the image. So at the beginning, I have mentioned that the foreground is way warmer. We have earthy tones here, and the depth here is created by contrast between the blues in the background and warm tones, browns in the foreground. So let's not lose it. Let's actually reuse it in our black and white conversion so we can still relate to it. And I would like to add maybe some quite warm tones. So definitely the image was taken in Oman. I have photographed the canyon in Oman, and this is not the Himalayas. I wouldn't definitely go for blue tones here. This was a very hot day. The temperatures over there are really, really high. So let's just try to recreate the atmosphere. So I'm going to go for warm tone for the shadows. Let's add a bit of this reddish magentish tone. So this creates this beautiful effect. Let's see, this is before, this is the after. So this is going a bit too much towards a sepia effect. So let's quickly jump over to midtones, and here let's experiment. Let's see if I add more red. No, this is creating very artificial effect. Something like this, I believe, works. So I'm going to add blue to the midtones. Okay, so that way we are enhancing the aerial perspective. The image still has, I would say, natural feel to it, but with the enhancement of color, we have added this very, very final touch to the image. We can still reposition the gradient if we want to do so. So if you feel that there is too much of the area that is not covered with the color grading, we can readjust the gradient. So this is our final result where we have added tints to the image, and this is the one step before black and white conversion without adding any color. So in this video we have taken the image that we've been working on in previous videos. We have analyzed this and we have decided that to create black and white representation of the image, it is simply way easier and way more efficient to start with the original version. So we have dropped entirely this image and we have started with original raw file. So I have taken you through 3 steps of my black and white conversion process. The first step was to create the black and white conversion with the black and white tool in Capture One. The second step was all about creating depth in the image with luminosity adjustments by increasing contrast between dark tones, bright tones, and working on harmonizing composition. And the very last, third step, this is just final touches, which are important because when it comes to black and white, texture is super important, and especially when you have texture in your image, as in case of this photo, that would be a shame just not to take advantage of this and not to play it out. So we have added a bit of texture and we have added tint, and that way we have created the black and white conversion of the color image. So thank you very much for watching. This was Kasia Zmokla from Digital Art Classes, and I will see you in the next video.